Good evening. There are two issues that I'd like to speak on briefly, and both concern trade, economy, and development. Of course, I speak as a layman. On the first issue of tariffs, I remain an advocate for free trade and globalization, for that is the only way of eradicating poverty and making the world more prosperous. Modern history has proven this to be a fact. And so I am fundamentally against tariffs and quotas. They encourage parochialism and protectionism. That said, 3 points need to be made if we are to argue this matter objectively. Number one, America is broke and broken. And that is why Trump managed to convince majority of Americans, the blue-collared and the working class, the Latinos and the blacks, through promises that are quite frankly straight out of the socialist cookbook, if not the communist manifesto. Protectionism, high tariffs, trade renegotiations, quotas, in short, an American license Raj Indira Gandhi would have been proud of. This time round, Trump is even more virulently America first, virulently anti-globalization, virulently anti-Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. He is choosing tariffs over talent. And therefore, although in the short run this might help America because through protectionism and high tariffs and quotas, Trump will create more jobs for Americans, more domestic growth and setting up of factories and lower imports. In the long run, protectionism and high tariffs will result in what they've always resulted in. A socialist trap that ultimately destroys a country's economy through less choice for consumers, outdated technology, increasing friction with countries, and higher prices because of lack of competition and rule of monopoly. Remember Ambassador cars and Campa Cola? In short, protectionism is against Darwinian evolution, whose overarching fundamental is spirit of competition enabling survival of the fittest. But here I come to the second point, and that's equally important. In taking to the spirit of competition and free trade, one cannot also at the same time allow unfair trade practices and dumping of goods. Also, if countries trading with America deployed high tariffs to protect their local business interests, then America is within its right to deploy reciprocal tariffs. Those opposing Trump now were all the while fine with Canada slapping 200% tariffs on American agricultural goods, or the EU slapping 50% tariffs on American wine. So it is fine for Canada and the EU and a host of other countries to protect their farmers and their domestic market and businesses, but not fine for America to do the same. Isn't that hypocritical? And as far as the problem of unfair trade practice is concerned, for example, I think Mr. Modi did great to pull out of RCEP, which was effectively a free trade agreement with China, a known currency manipulator that props up its companies underhand, indulging in unfair trade practices, not to mention COVID and destroying the world and the economy. Therefore, in a just world and in the long run, tariffs are harmful and counterproductive, but they are an effective measure to check unfair trade practices of trading nations. And remember, the extent of tariff and quotas is decided by the WTO, erstwhile the GATT, and trading nations come to mutually agreed upon tariff rates. The ultimate goal, as far as I'm concerned, is a level and free playing field that encourages competition, respects and rewards intellectual property, and gives the consumers a choice at a reasonable cost. High tariffs ultimately don't do any of these three things. Also remember, all things being equal, imposing tariffs by a developing country on identical goods being imported from a developed country is superfluous because that product of the same quality and standard is being made by someone in the developed world who is earning 10 times the wages. And so when that product is sold in the developing world, its cost would naturally be higher. And the consumers there would naturally choose the domestic product. A simple pencil of identical quality made in America will sell at a much higher price than its Indian equivalent in India because the American who made it is given much higher wages. Did you, for example, know that Japan does not impose any tariffs on American cars? Because the Japanese don't want to buy American cars as they are not as good as non-American cars. As simple as that. In fact, it is the USA that imposes tariffs on Japanese car makers, and yet Japanese car makers have roughly the same share as American car makers in the USA. Look, let us not try and reinvent the wheel here. Protectionism is bad, period. Darwin said so, and Darwin is always right. Now let me very briefly come to the other issue. Yesterday, our Commerce Minister, Mr. Piyush Goyal, made a host of rather shocking comments, it has to be said. We are making, he said, food hyper delivery apps, creating cheap labor so the rich can have a meal without stepping out, while the Chinese are working on AI, EVs and semiconductors. Should we be making ice cream delivery apps or making chip semiconductors? Dukandari karni hai, he asked derisively. Are you proud we are creating delivery boys and girls, he added. I am afraid the minister's remarks and taunts are damaging and way out of order. Firstly, Indian startups are not just delivering food and making ice creams, but also carrying out cutting-edge research in EV, batteries, space tech, drug design, semiconductors and AI. It is never an either or. Besides, the food delivery startups are providing millions of jobs and contributing billions in taxes. To be derisory towards this sector shows arrogance and ignorance in equal measure. Also, has the minister heard of Log9, MedGenome, Mindgrove, ShaktiSock, Gigadyne, Skyroot, Sarvam, Agnikul? If you haven't, then can you please ask the IAS officer deputed to you to read a little on these startups at the cutting edge of science and engineering? Dear Minister, if you cannot help, don't hinder. Besides, people living in glass houses should not throw stones at others. What has the state done with all the money that it takes from us? India's R&D spend is just 0.6% of the GDP. Our education sector is in shambles and our universities and schools are far from world class. 56% of high school students cannot solve a simple division sum. 25% struggle with reading a class 2 level text. 51% of Indian graduates are unemployable. 79% of India's workforce is unskilled. Our governments are busy being in the business of running businesses, spending 9 lakh crores every year in propping up PSUs, most of which are loss making. And you are comparing our ecosystem with China? China is spending nearly $1 trillion on startups. India is spending a tenth of that. But you want the same results? I will tell you what you are spending on. Freebies, MSP, and every damn thing to placate your vote banks and push state more and more in debt that would soon have to be paid by these very startups. You are berating delivery boys and girls when you are spending billions of dollars of our money in asking people to dig trenches through Manrega. Gadde khudwa rahe ho aap. And what have you done to reform our sectors that are crying out for reforms? What have you done as far as labor reforms are concerned? As far as reducing the number of compliances and filings of business are concerned? So please look inwards before you denigrate our wealth creators.